conference season is, of course, upon us. The Lib Dems going first. They're starting theirs tomorrow in Bournemouth, in case you're interested. And it got me wondering, how important do you think the Lib Dems are to the UK political landscape? How much of an impact do you think that they will have in the next general election, particularly when we consider things like tactical voting? Because let's face it, a lot of people now, they don't like Labour, they don't like Tories, and they're going to be quite tactical. Or the other way, they really love Tories or they really love Labour, so they want to do some kind of manipulation to either get someone in or keep someone out. What do you make to Lib Dems?
Well, the truth about the Lib Dems is they've always been, for years now, the recipient of the reject votes of people who are not unhappy with the main parties. So that means that in order to maximise that rubbish vote, they will say anything to anyone at any time in order to persuade them that they're on their side. And they generally excite disgust amongst serious politicians, both Conservative and Labour.
I think that's quite harsh.
Fair to say. I don't think it's harsh at all. I think we've seen them do it the whole time. But there was always one thing you could say about the Lib Dems that you could rely on them for. You could always believe that they were going to be the party that wanted us to be a member of the European Union. Except I see that today they seem to have ditched that as well. So basically, vote Lib Dem, vote for anything you imagine. Vote for a look in the mirror in the face.
Get a lucky dip, is what you say. You vote Lib Dem, get a lucky dip. Kevin, what do you make to it?
I enjoyed that. It's very good to be back with Daniel.
He's missed you, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are no Lib Dems here to defend themselves, Michelle, so let's take a look at your question. Currently, today's opinion polls, they're 12% of our voting intention. So there's a lot of people in this country who are Lib Dem supporters. They've only got 15 MPs. That's up from 11 at the election. They've won 4 by-elections. They used to have, believe it or not, 57, which is almost 10% of Westminster. So they are a serious party in British politics, and they could prove hugely influential, is my answer to your question. I will say, in my 17 years as a councillor, that the nastiest elections I fought were Labour-Lib Dem elections, actually. I found them to be very aggressive campaigners. And a lot of people in the Labour Party say that, but they are significant. They're lucky, though. They don't have to present a consistent narrative, in my experience, across the country. I've often found that they'll present one thing in one part of the country where they want to beat the Tories, and then somewhere else where it's a Lib Dem-Labour fight, they can be different. So it's easier, as Daniel said. I phrased it more kindly.
Even I managed to beat the Lib Dems at the last...
Even you?
Even I
Bloody hell.
managed to beat the Lib Dems at the last election. I've got to say, just on that point about abuse and stuff, because I obviously ran against all the parties, and I always found, and you will appreciate this, but the majority of the abuse that I received was almost exclusively from Labour campaigners. I remember those elections very, very well. They were nasty, personal... just nastiness. I've never really understood why can't you just compete against someone on an equal footing when you need to start resorting to personal attacks and trying to undermine people and all the rest of it. To me, you're losing the battle a little bit because your policies, your politics and your personality really should win the battle for you. Anyway, you talk about Lib Dems and whether or not people take them seriously. So if we look at some of the last by-elections, so you've got Tiverton and Honiton. Lib Dems overturned what I think was one of the biggest ever Tory majorities, 24,000. In Somerton and Frome, again, overturned a massive Tory majority. So they really socked it to you guys at those by-elections.
They did, and I suspect the fact that Kevin is basically agreeing with me, but in much kinder and gentler terms, shows how the Labour Party is preparing for some sort of coalition with the Lib Dems after the next generation.
Nice try, Daniel.
Some sort of shady deal.
Listen, my friend. Listen, pal of Liz. Rumbled. That pal over there of Liz Truss and Boris. His party was in coalition with the Lib Dems from 2010 to 2015. Yeah, never mind you throwing coalitions over at us.
When we learnt our lessons, you see, about all of that.
Nice to hear.
No, it's true. In by-elections, people get angry. Very often with the government, and if they get the chance to throw out the government candidate, they do, and the Liberal Democrats are very often where they turn to. There is a greater sense of tactical voting going on, certainly in those by-elections. Whether that carries through to the general election, we'll see, may well do. And the Liberal Democrats could be the beneficiary of that. But as always, they benefit from never having... Fundamentally, they're not serious because they never normally expect to have power. So they feel that they can behave frivolously about important political decisions. And to their credit, my experience of the Labour Party is they don't do that because the Labour Party know that they could be in power, be it in your local authority or at the country at large, and they take it seriously.
Are there any Lib Dem supporters or voters out there? What do you think to what you're hearing? Get in touch and tell me. What do you think to this notion of tactical voting, and particularly, you know, these really well-organised and publicised campaigns? There's something about something about that makes me a little bit uneasy. I think, should it be legal to try and manipulate voting in this way to affect an outcome? Is that democratic? I don't know, you tell me.
I think it's very democratic, Michelle. It's about making every vote count. And there are a lot of these organisations in existence. And I think it's not, you know, manipulative is an interesting word. Everybody's trying to manipulate the results of elections into their own interests. Conservative Party, Labour, SNP, Lib Dems, they want to win. But we also have an issue in this country where every vote doesn't count. And in some areas where the outcome is tiny, you know, historically you had MPs winning a seat with like 32% of the vote and then two other candidates on 29%. And actually those two other candidates were philosophically and politically more aligned.
But is that you almost supporting then a change, get away with first past the post and move to proportional representation? Would you agree with PR?
Well, personally, I think PR needs to be looked at because I don't think every vote counts in this country. And whilst I don't agree with your colleague Nigel Farage, and I don't like anything he stands for politically, do you think it makes sense that there's never been a Member of Parliament representing his ideas? I mean...
Well, no, and a lot of people will say, because a lot of people will say, oh, Michelle, you had a referendum, didn't we, about AV back in... I'll probably get my year wrong because I'm going from memory. I think it was about 2014, was it? Something like that? Yeah. Was it 2014 or 2011? Anyway, we had this referendum, and of course people then voted against it, and people will throw that back at me and say, obviously the country didn't want it. But then we had that election where UKIP, it got millions of votes, didn't it? And it only had the one seat that was the defection. I think it was Douglas Carswell. I do say I'm doing all this from my memory, but I'm pretty certain it's right. And I think that woke up a lot of people to the fact that actually, how can you have a party with millions of votes and, to your point, literally hardly any, if any at all, representation within Parliament?
Well, I don't agree with all this. I think first past the post is a very fair system because every vote does count.
No, it doesn't.
It does count. In your constituency, you vote for the candidate you think is the best. We don't vote for parties in this country. It's not in our legal system. It's not in our constitution. We vote for individuals to represent us locally. And you vote for the person you think is best. Now, in that, I do think you're going to see, inevitably, you will see some sort of tactical voting. And I have no objection to that as a matter of principle. So I'd say that is part of the system, if you like. But every vote does count. It's just that not every voter gets the candidate and representative they want, because some people lose. That's part of being an election. But in PR systems, you vote for a party, and then the parties go off into a back room and they cobble together some sort of government on a half manifesto you've never seen before, all done in smoke-filled rooms, or not so much smoke-filled nowadays, but back rooms, and, you know, it's really corrupt.
Yeah, well, it's corrupt. It's not, Daniel. The thing I'd say to finish on that is that we have had Conservative-led government for so long in this country, and your party doesn't actually... yes, you won under our current system fair and square, absolutely, but you're not... We haven't had representative government that reflects what a majority of the people in this country want. And I always see what happens is when a party wins power, it then goes, actually, the rules are fine, we'll keep it like this, which is what the Labour Party did last time. And I do hope if Keir Starmer is granted the privilege of leading this country ever, he takes a different approach. But that's personal.
Well, he said he's not going to.
I'm just saying what my personal view is.
Well, there you go. What do you make to it all at home? Actually, people are disagreeing with some of what you're saying that absolutely. Gavin from Darlington says, yes, the Lib Dems are a serious party, and therefore they are there for the people that do not want a Labour or Tory government. Someone else is making the point about some of the smaller parties joined forces rather than fragmenting all of the votes. You might have a country that perhaps reflects people people's wants and desires a little bit more.